You have to either have some kind of serious mental disorder or a bunch of screws loose in your head if you step up to Yujiro Hanma in a fight and call him the challenger. But in the case of Kaioh Kaku, it appears to be both of those things in the best possible ways. The 146-year-old kung fu genius has already broken the back of Father Time himself with his inhuman lifespan. But what's even more insane is the fact that he could give guys a fifth his age a serious run for their money in a fight. And that's because, like Yujiro, Kaioh Kaku has honed his body into becoming a lethal weapon in and of itself. But the biggest difference between them is that while Yujiro achieves victory through brute strength, Kaioh Kaku does it purely through martial arts, though he did once subscribe to a similar philosophy as the Ogre. Yet it is that very difference in philosophy that makes him one of the toughest fighters in Baki by far. And, as you guys might have already guessed by the title of this video, a lot of that has to do with his anatomy. So, without further ado, let's break down the secret behind the strength of a century-and-a-half old man that can break stone walls like they were made out of foam. This is Kaioh Kaku's anatomy explored. He used to be like Yujiro and Biscuit Oliva until he got his butt handed to him by a 60-year-old. Kaioh Kaku in the past. Baki is a series that explores many different forms and avenues of what is essentially the same thing, fighting. Combat is inseparable from human nature and history, and over the thousands of years that we've existed, people have come up with several different fighting techniques to defend themselves and inflict fatal damage on others. But generally, according to Baki logic at least, there are two types of fighters. Those who rely on techniques as weapons and tools in a fight, and those who force their way through any encounter using brute strength alone. Yujiro Hanma and Biscuit Oliva are prime examples of the latter category, as neither of them use fancy martial arts techniques to end a fight. They simply slug it out and use their brute strength alone to ensure victory. Kaioh Kaku used to be just like them back when he was comparatively younger. See, while the Chinese martial arts genius is introduced to the series at the ripe old age of 146, appearing as a frail old man who usually needs a wheelchair to move around, he naturally wasn't always like this. In fact, during his recollection of his life over the previous century, Kaku states that he used to be much like Yujiro Hanma himself, in that he believed as long as he was the strongest, the rest would fall in line. Kaku was built like an ox, even in his mid-40s, with a frame that wasn't dissimilar to Biscuit Oliva's. He was tall, well over 6 feet, all of it pure muscle and rippling vein. He used to wrestle bulls into submission in front of live audiences, and eventually he became untouchable. It's possible that before the emergence of Yujiro Hanma on the global stage, that Kaioh Kaku was considered to be the strongest Asian man alive. He could have also fought in and won the Great Raitai tournament during this period of his life, because he is introduced as the winner of the last tournament, and Kaku's life changed around a century ago. But what happened that made him abandon his life of a strongman and brute force specialist, as Baki likes to put it? Well, to state things bluntly, he got whooped by a 60-year-old man that changed his entire perspective on what strength is supposed to mean. At the peak of his career as a fighter, Kaku met and fought an elderly martial artist who feels like the Chinese version of Gouki Shibukawa because of the way his fight with Kaku goes. Despite being a third of Kaku's height and well below his weight class, this martial artist was able to stomp the crap out of Kaku much like Shibukawa does to Ali Jr. later on in Baki Season 3. Of course, the beatdown on Kaku was more brutal enough to make him give up on his strength training regime entirely and dedicate himself to a life of martial arts. Kaku spent the next 50 years subjecting himself to the harshest of natural terrains and harnessing his inner fighting spirit to master his external body and its movements. Kaku himself has stated that it was 50 years before the current Raitai tournament that he learned the true meaning of strength through his dedication to martial arts. He earned his title as a fabled Sea King long after he acquired it, but you wouldn't be able to tell he's a killing machine just by looking at him. Kaioh Kaku is introduced as the smallest guy in the entire Raitai tournament, even smaller than Baki, and is presented as a withered old man for the most part. He moves around in a wheelchair, wears sunglasses to protect his weakening eyes, and does everything imaginable to give off the impression that he feels the weight of his age. The reality, of course, is far different, and we learn that as soon as we see his first match in the Raitai tournament. Age is literally just a number for a guy that can manipulate his body on a microscopic level. Kaioh Kaku's insane anatomy. In episode 3 of Baki Season 3, we saw Kaioh Kaku go up against Kaioh Samwon, a Muay Thai practitioner that was just 25 years old. The fact that he gained the rank of Kaioh at such a young age was proof of his prodigious talent in and of itself, let alone the fact that Samwon played with cobras for fun as a child and as an adult, and can nearly break a stone pillar in half with one of his kicks. Yet, when faced by this seemingly weak and frail old Kaioh Kaku, Samwon ended up falling prey to one of the oldest tricks in the book, a good old nutshot. To be fair to him, it happened at speeds that were unexpected from a man of Kaku's age, to say the least. And the fact that the more experienced Kaioh used one of Samwon's strikes to turn his hand into a sunglass holder was more than enough to disorient the young fighter. With one swift motion, Kaku disrobed and disposed of Samwon's prodigious talent, using nothing but experience and skill, and those are where his strongest points lie as a fighter. Anatomically speaking, there's nothing special about Kaioh Kaku's body, except for the fact that he's lived a freakishly long life. He isn't on some kind of life-extending miracle drug a la Jack, neither has he the muscle mass to even call himself a lifter anymore, though his physique is still pretty chiseled for his age. In his off time, Kaioh Kaku is like any other geezer. His chopsticks rattle when he eats, he needs assistance while walking most of the time, you know, that sort of thing. In fact, the oldest thing about him is probably his face, considering how many wrinkles Keisuke Itagaki added to it during his character conception. But otherwise, Kaioh Kaku is just an old man with the health issues you'd expect of an old man. What makes him such an interesting character is that all of it is a front to hide his true strength from his opponents, because as a martial artist, Kaku has mastered the true meaning of the art form, and that is survival at all costs. Kaku uses a wheelchair to hide his deceptive speed because he wants his opponents to think he's a helpless geezer. He wears sunglasses so he can flex on them when the time is right, because underneath that facade, Kaioh Kaku is an anatomical freak of nature. While he usually presents himself as an aloof old man, it's when Kaku gets serious that you see the true extent of his powers, even at the ripe old age of 146. When the foreigners partaking in the Chinese Great Rai Tai tournament started outperforming the actual Kaiohs of the host country, Kaku teaches a lesson to the ministers responsible for the degradation in quality of a Kaioh by pinning their heads together and then chopping them off with a single swift motion. In that one moment, he proved that not only was he actually ruthless, but that his true anatomical prowess only began with his absurdly long lifespan. We find out more about this during his fight with Yujiro, where we learn that Kaioh Kaku's strikes have enough force to embed something as small as his sunglasses firmly into the stone wall of the Rai Tai tournament arena. Despite using a wheelchair to move around for most of his screen time, it's clear Kaku doesn't need it, because he starts off his fight with Yujiro by leveraging the wheelchair and turning it into a weapon. The speed and strength with which Kaioh Kaku gets out of the chair and hurls it at Yujiro's face is astonishing to say the least, but not as astonishing as what the old man manages to accomplish next. Yujiro Hanma is known as the world's strongest creature in Baki. His raw power is so massive that he subdued the US Army into a treaty of friendship with just himself, and he has defeated animals and people much larger than him throughout his life on a near constant basis. One punch from the man is enough to kill elephants, so naturally you can imagine what it might do to an aging 146-year-old man. But shockingly, Kaioh Kaku manages to tank Yujiro's punches by using a secret technique that involves him altering his anatomy called Shao Li. According to Baki logic, when Kaku is using Shao Li in its defensive form, he can relax his body to the extent of hyposthenia, which can end up dislocating his joints from their sockets if need be. Now, you might be asking why such an extreme measure would be needed. Well, that's because that is the basic principle of fighting using Shao Li. It's a technique that relaxes the body to the point of nothingness, which offers negligible to no resistance to an incoming attack. Usually, when you're in a fight, your muscles tend to tense up, offering resistance to your opponent's blows, which conversely ends up harming you. You'll often hear boxers talking about staying relaxed and loose during fights, because when your muscles stiffen up, it opens you up to more damage than you would absorb had they already been relaxed. To offer a relatable analogy, think about what happens to your neck after spending hours binging content or playing your favorite video game. It hurts, right? That's because your muscles have stiffened up to a point where movement induces pain. This is why doctors are heavily recommending adding physical exercise to our daily routines, especially if you work remotely, because sitting in one place for too long can, in fact, kill you. Not immediately, but in the long run, absolutely. Now, if you had the power to relax all your muscles and keep them loose and functional at all times, what would happen? Well, your neck pain would either disappear or be far less than usual, and when this loosening of the body takes place in the middle of a fight, it can make all the difference between a win or a loss. Now, imagine if you could just dislocate your jaw when a punch comes towards it to the point that it simply follows the punch's trajectory before returning to a position where you could easily reattach it without taking any damage whatsoever. That would be A, highly unsettling for your opponent because usually breaking bones ends fights, and B, make you a martial arts genius like Kaioh Kaku, because what we just explained is the basic concept behind his defensive Zhao Li. Kaioh Kaku has such mastery over his anatomy that he can dislocate his jaw at will and tank punches that would otherwise blow apart armored tanks. He's like Mr. Fantastic in that sense because his body just absorbs the impact of physical attacks. But that analogy makes much more sense when you apply it to Kaioh Kaku's offensive Zhao Li, because that stuff legit works like a rubber band. So remember how we just said that Kaku basically moves his joints in the trajectory of incoming attacks to basically nullify their impact? Well, he doesn't exactly avoid them either. So what happens to the force that his body experiences regardless of whether the blows he took were soft or hard? He ends up storing it to unleash devastating punches when he switches from a defensive stance to an offensive stance. The idea of relaxing the body to endure blows applies to delivering them as well, which can greatly amplify the impact of something as simple as a seemingly light punch. When Kaioh Kaku went on the offensive against Yujiro Hanma, everyone was shocked to see the ogre himself backed into a corner without Kaku having even touched him. Baki nearly had a meltdown seeing it because he didn't understand what was happening, but that's understandable because only Yujiro could feel the true weight behind the punch Kaku's frail hands were waiting to unleash. He ends up luring Kaku into the corner and escapes his punch at the last possible moment to show the crowd his reason for evading that blow. Kaioh Kaku, aged 146, put a massive crater in the stone wall that formed the Raitai tournament ring using nothing but his bare hand. According to Baki logic, Kaku had relaxed his hands so much before making the strike that he released all the built-up tension from his body into that point on the wall all at once, thus achieving the unachievable. Once again, think of Mr. Fantastic. If someone tries to run into his body, they end up taking worse damage on rebound, and when he punches someone using his rubbery hands, the impact is far greater than from a regular hand. It's the same concept but applied to the actual human anatomy and contextualized through martial arts. The reason why Kaku managed to back Yujiro into a corner was because Yujiro didn't expect this kind of power from this kind of an opponent. Kaku was a shriveled up old man until just a few moments ago, yet now he had the world's strongest creature momentarily cornered. Yujiro rewarded this test of his strength by attacking Kaku with his demon face activated, and Kaku still managed to tank at least a couple of hints from this Super Saiyan-like state. If it had been anyone else that possessed a lesser degree of control over their own anatomies, it would have been game over for them the moment that first punch landed. But Kaku's mastery over the human body has been unparalleled. Using nothing more than skill and the perception his enemies have of him, he has been able to remain on top of the Chinese martial arts scene for a full century. This doesn't mean there aren't flaws in his game, but Kaku has a last-ditch, fail-safe tactic that makes up for those flaws, and once again requires shocking mastery over the human anatomy. He treats a fight like an animal, and therefore wins against Yujiro. Kaioh Kaku's heart-stopping special technique. Given the fact that he's been honing his craft for at least 50 years, Kaioh Kaku has pretty much mastered every controllable part of the human anatomy, and certain things that shouldn't be controllable as well. But the one thing he cannot escape is the body's pure instinct. Yujiro's initial trepidation of Kaioh Kaku gives way to his usual mockery, as he is able to replicate the Zhao Li technique mid-fight as a massive FU to 4,000 years of Chinese martial arts. Not only that, he exposes the biggest chink in this seemingly indestructible armor by doing something as simple as plucking a strand of Kaku's hair. Though the act itself is not inherently damaging to anything apart from your hairline, probably, the instinctual jolt of pain that plucking out that strand of hair sends through Kaioh Kaku's body is enough for Yujiro to effectively nullify the effects of the Zhao Li technique. What's more, he goes on to prove that while strikes might be ineffective against Kaku's incredibly relaxed physique, grappling moves and throws were not, and this resulted in the Kaioh trying to end the fight in a blitz attack. This fight between Kaku and Yujiro was billed as the test of ultimate strength versus ultimate technique, and for the most part, technique was able to keep up with strength. But once Yujiro saw through the Zhao Li, Kaku knew his time was up, so he decided to do something that would end a fight in nature without even needing an exchange of blows. He ends up playing dead. Just as Yujiro starts having fun and letting loose with a counter of Kaioh Kaku's flurry of attacks, assisted by his dirty dragon-like nails, he ends up getting frustrated mid-match because Kaku's heart seemingly stops from the stress of the fight. He's declared dead by natural causes, and every doctor in the tournament agrees that there is no way Kaku could have faked his death for hours. In reality, that's exactly what Kaku did, because he applied the law of the jungle to his fight with Yujiro. Kaioh Kaku has an extraordinary command over his own body. This is why he has lived as long and as healthy as he has. But against Yujiro, all logical sense and training goes out the window because he is quite literally built different. Hanma genes are said to breed people ideally suited for fighting, as their musculature is different from that of a regular human being. The moment Kaku realized this jig was up, he decided to do what every animal does to avoid being killed and devoured by a predator in nature. He rolls over and plays dead. Kaku's control over his heart rate is such that over an hour had passed before he was revived. And even then, he didn't consider himself the loser of the fight because he forced Yujiro into a forfeit. The fact that Kaioh Kaku was skilled enough to accomplish such a feat drew praise from the Ogre himself, who was named a Kaioh by Kaku in honor of his pure strength and knowledge of martial arts. But it's insane to think that this guy, at 146 years old, thought of Yujiro Hanma as his first true challenge. The two Mad Lads even agreed to have a rematch in the next Raitai tournament, which will take place 100 years after the current one, which, once again, is the definition of being anatomical anomalies. The oldest person in our world was a French woman who spent 122 years on planet Earth, and she was not nearly as spry as Kaku is in Baki Season 3. But knowing Yujiro and Kaku, they might just see each other at the next Raitai tournament, and the one after that as well, precisely because of their freakishly durable anatomies. Marvelous verdict! And this is where the video comes to a conclusion because that's all the relevant information we have for you on the anatomical anomaly that is Kaioh Kaku. He is the personification of the phrase, age is just a number, and he proves that through his insanely fit, insanely flexible, and insanely durable body. If he keeps harnessing his skills the way he has been doing for the past 100 years, we have no doubt he'll continue living for the next 100 as well. But what we want to know is what you guys think about this video. Do you think Kaioh Kaku is one of the craziest wildcard characters from the Bakiverse? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing anime content, and we'll see you guys in the next one.